On my son Tyler's wedding day, I was just trying to find the restroom in the church. I heard Amelia, my future daughter-in-law, laugh. That weakling believes every word I say. As soon as he signs, that entire Chestnut Grove farm is mine. My heart stopped, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that my son didn't believe me. My heart felt like it dropped onto the cold tile floor of that church. A chill ran straight up my spine, and my hands, the same hands that built that farm, went completely numb. The sound of the organ playing "Here Comes the Bride" echoed from the main hall, a beautiful, hopeful sound. But here, in this small, dim hallway, the air was thick and heavy, like it was poisoned. I, John Smith, stood frozen outside the bridal room. And those words, they just kept cutting into me. That weakling. She was talking about my son, my Tyler. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is my story. It's good to have a place to share this, because some things you just can't tell anyone, not even your closest friends. If you're listening, maybe give this a like, and if you feel comfortable, comment what state you're in. I'm just curious where this story is being heard tonight. I'm in the Midwest, but maybe you're out in Florida, or Arizona, or Texas. It just helps, knowing you're not alone. I stood there, my suit feeling stiff and suffocating, trying to pull air into my lungs. It felt like my throat had closed up. I heard them again, Amelia and Mark, Tyler's best friend, a man I'd had at my dinner table 100 times, laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a sharp, cold, mocking sound. The sweet voice I was so used to, the one that always said, "Oh, Dad John, you're the best," was suddenly shrill and unbelievably cruel. She didn't just want the money, I realized. She despised my son. She called him an idiot for trusting her, a fool for thinking she actually loved him. She bragged, her voice dripping with contempt, about how she just needed Tyler to sign a few simple papers after the honeymoon. And just like that, Chestnut Grove Farm, my entire life's legacy, the very dirt I'd poured my sweat and blood into since I was a young man, would be in her hands. Mark even chimed in, "The old man, that's me, won't know what hit him until it's too late." Rage flooded me. It was hot, and it was fast. I'm a practical man. I've spent my whole life fixing things, believing in direct action. My first, overwhelming instinct was to kick that door off its hinges, drag my son out of that sanctuary, and scream the truth in his face until he understood. But then, I froze. Just as fast as the anger came, a cold, sick realization hit me. I know my son. Tyler has always been insecure, always felt like he was living in my shadow, in the massive shadow of this farm. He's a good kid, but gentle. If I stormed in right now, a crazy old man yelling accusations, I'd be proving Mark right. I'd be the difficult father trying to ruin his big day. Tyler wouldn't believe me. He'd dig in his heels. He would choose her because she'd spent months feeding him the validation he always craved. I realized, in that one terrible moment, I couldn't win by shouting. That was the exact trap they wanted me to walk into. I had to back away, my hand gripping the cold plaster wall to steady myself. I had to walk back out there, sit in that front pew, and watch my son make the biggest mistake of his life. I had to choose a different path, a much, much harder one. So I sat in the front pew, right as the music swelled and the doors opened. The whole thing felt like a bad play, like I was watching it all through muddy water. Everything was in slow motion. Everyone turned to watch Amelia walk down the aisle. I watched too, but I was watching Tyler, his eyes lit up. He was actually tearing up, his face full of such raw, honest love. He looked at her like she was some kind of savior, the only person in the world who truly saw his worth. And then I watched Amelia, in her pure white dress, a vision of innocence, smiling that sweet smile right at my son. That smile, It made me physically sick to my stomach. I could still hear her voice in my head, calling him a weakling. They exchanged their vows. The pastor was talking about trust and honor and till death do us part. Every word felt like a lie. I had to clench my fists so hard in my pockets that I could feel my fingernails digging into my palms, just to keep myself from standing up and shouting. The physical pain was the only thing keeping me grounded. I felt a bitterness I'd never known. I wasn't just losing my son to a woman, I was losing him to a parasite, a con artist. My mind drifted away from the ceremony. While the pastor spoke about eternal love, I was remembering the late nights, years ago, my hands black with axle grease, working under the floodlights in the barn. I was trying to fix that old John Deere tractor myself because I couldn't afford a mechanic, and the crops wouldn't wait. I remembered writing the check for $20,000 for that stupid app idea Tyler had in college, knowing it would go nowhere, but hoping it would build his confidence. I remembered another $10,000 for a business seminar he never even finished. I was always trying to build that foundation for him, something solid he could stand on. But sitting there, listening to those hollow vows, I realized I hadn't built a foundation. I'd built a crutch. I had accidentally enabled the very weakness, the desperate need for approval that Amelia had spotted and sunk her hooks into. The reception was even worse. The music was too loud, the laughter too bright. It all felt fake and grotesque. Mark, the best man, the traitor, walked around, slapping me on the back. "Congratulations, John! Our boy Tyler's finally settling down, huh?" The suffocating fakeness of it made me want to hit him. I just nodded, forcing a smile that I'm sure looked more like a grimace. I sat alone in the corner, nursing a glass of water, watching Tyler and Amelia have their first dance. He looked so happy. And the sadness I felt, it started to change. It burned off, and what was left was something cold and sharp and perfectly clear. A resolve. I wouldn't say a word tonight. I would let my son have this one single counterfeit night of happiness. But tomorrow, my fight would begin. I am a practical man after all. I believe in action, not words. And I was going to act. Tyler and Amelia went on their honeymoon, somewhere in the Caribbean, on whose money I wasn't entirely sure. The house became quiet, unnaturally quiet. Those first few weeks were difficult. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like an accusation. It was a heavy, empty space that seemed to amplify my failure at the wedding. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a judgment. I'd walk past Tyler's empty room, and the quiet would just scream at me. But then, one morning about a week in, I woke up early. The sun wasn't even up yet. I lay there, and for the first time, I realized I felt light. The crushing tension from the wedding was gone. There was no more performance, no fake smiles for Amelia, no lies hanging in the air. I got up and went to the kitchen. I brewed a pot of coffee, the good stuff, and the smell of it, dark, rich, and real, filled the house. It was the first honest thing I'd felt in months. I took my mug out onto the back porch, just in an old t-shirt and jeans. I watched the sun start to burn the fog off the fields of Chestnut Grove. It was all still here. It was all still mine. The land was real. I spent my time where I belonged, in my workshop. That place is my sanctuary. The smell of sawdust, old oil, and metal, that's my world. I pulled out my old Craftsman toolbox, the one my own father gave me. Every wrench and socket was in its place. I got to work. I decided to give the big John Deere riding mower a full tune-up. There's a peace in practical work. The sound of the wrench clicking, the feel of the metal, the smell of Pennzoil as I checked the oil. This is my world, a world where things make sense. If something is broken, you find the problem and you fix it. I wasn't some confused old man. I was a mechanic. I was a farmer. I felt my control coming back with every bolt I tightened. I spent the next days walking the property, checking fence lines, mending a loose section by the south pasture. I got the ladder out and fixed that loose gutter on the barn I'd been ignoring. These were my acts of self-care. I found my peace again, not in thinking, but in doing. I also realized how much I had isolated myself over the past few years, even before this. I was so focused on the farm, so focused on trying to set Tyler up, that I'd let my own life shrink. I picked up the phone. My hand hovered over Tyler's name, but I passed it. I called Victor, an old family lawyer, and, more importantly, an old fishing buddy. We just talked, for maybe 20 minutes. We talked about the weather, about how bad the baseball team was this year, about a new lure he'd tried. I didn't mention Amelia. I didn't mention the farm or the wedding. It was just a normal call. But when I hung up, I felt a small spark of something. Hope, maybe. I wasn't completely alone in this. The call came right after they got back. I'd been dreading it, my stomach in knots just waiting for the phone to ring. When it finally did, Tyler's voice sounded happy, but it was thin, forced. "Hey, Dad, how's everything at the farm?" He went on for a few minutes about the trip, the white sand, the blue water, all the generic postcard stuff. And then, just as I knew it would, the topic changed. His whole tone shifted. It became hesitant, almost like he was reading from a script someone else had written. "So, Dad," he said, "listen, Amelia and I were looking at some investment opportunities, and she thinks it would be a really good idea if we consolidated some of the assets. You know, just to make them easier to manage." My stomach tightened into a cold knot. Consolidated. I knew that word. That wasn't Tyler's word. That was her word. Or maybe Mark's. "Tyler," I said, and I fought to keep my voice perfectly calm, perfectly reasonable. I couldn't let the anger I felt at the wedding come through. "Son, you need to slow down. You're moving way too fast here. You don't really know her." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "Dad, I overheard some things at the wedding." I was steady. I didn't tell him the worst of it. I didn't say she called you an idiot or she called you a weakling. I knew that would just wound his pride and make him defensive. I just said I was worried about her financial motivations. "I just want you to be careful with any legal papers, Tyler. That's all. Have Victor look at anything before you even think about signing it." There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. For a second, I thought maybe I'd gotten through. Then I heard it. It was faint, but I heard it. Amelia, whispering angrily in the background. When Tyler spoke again, his voice was completely different. It was cold, hard. "Mark said you'd do this," he said, his voice flat. "Mark warned me you'd be jealous, that you can't stand to see me making my own decisions for once." It felt like he'd slapped me across the face. Jealous? I was stunned. "Tyler, what are you talking about? I built this entire place for you. I'm just trying to protect you, to protect what's yours." "No," he was almost shouting now. "You're trying to control me, just like you always have. Amelia is the only person who has ever actually trusted me. She sees my potential." Every word was a hammer blow. They had done their work well. They had taken his deepest insecurity, the one I had tried and failed to fix, and they'd twisted it into a weapon to use against me. You're just an old man who's afraid of being lonely." That one. That was the one that did it. Afraid of being lonely. It cut straight to the bone. All the warmth left my voice. My own tone turned to ice. "All right, Tyler," I said, my voice quiet and dead. "I won't say another word." I hung up the phone. The bitterness was so strong I could taste it. I had tried to warn him. I had failed. And the worst part was the chilling realization. They had planned for this. They knew I'd object, and they already had their answer ready. It was a Saturday afternoon, maybe 2 weeks after that horrible, cold phone call. I was in my workshop, my sanctuary. I had a piece of oak spinning on the lathe, the sweet, sharp smell of the cut wood filling the air. I was just trying to turn it into a simple bowl, trying to find my center again. The hum of the motor, the feel of the chisel shaping the wood, the focus. This is my meditation. This is where I make sense of the world, where my hands can fix what's broken. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. The sound of gravel crunching under tires, coming way too fast up my long driveway. It wasn't the familiar, heavy rumble of Tyler's truck or Victor's old sedan. This was a high-strung, angry sound. An engine sound I didn't recognize. A low, aggressive growl that set my teeth on edge. I hit the kill switch on the lathe. The sudden, deafening silence in the shop felt heavy, like a held breath. I wiped my hands on an old rag, my knuckles stained with grease from a bearing I'd replaced on the tractor earlier. I looked out the side window, squinting against the afternoon sun. It was a black, shiny German sports car, a BMW or something, looking completely alien and offensive, parked next to my dusty Ford F-150. It looked like a predator, and then they got out. Amelia and Mark. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than my first truck, with sunglasses so big they covered half her face. She looked like she was visiting a zoo, disgusted by the dirt. Mark was in a blazer, looking less like a friend and more like her personal lawyer or a bodyguard. They didn't knock on the house door. They didn't call. They walked straight towards my workshop, their steps confident, their eyes scanning the property, looking around like they were measuring the place for new curtains. They were walking like they already owned it. I stepped out of the workshop door, blocking the entrance. The daylight felt too bright. I was still holding the heavy, 12-inch steel wrench I'd used on the bearing. I didn't even realize it was in my hand. It just felt right, solid. Amelia didn't even bother with a hello. She stopped a few feet away, the sun glinting off those big black lenses, hiding her eyes, but not the smirk on her lips. "Tyler told you," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was as sharp and cold as glass, cutting through the quiet afternoon air. "We're here for the paperwork. The power of attorney. Tyler and I have been discussing it, and he wants me to manage the farm's assets." She tilted her head, and the smirk widened. "He agrees that you're just not as sharp as you used to be. It's better for someone with a modern business sense to take over, to maximize the potential of this place." My blood ran cold. The words, the audacity. She was trying to legally seize my farm, right here on my own property, and she was using my own son's words as the weapon to do it. The "not sharp" stung, but the "manage the assets" was the killing blow. I looked past her, straight at Mark. "And you, Mark?" My voice was low, rough, like gravel. "You're part of this? You, who I've known since you were in diapers? I taught you how to bait a hook right off that dock. I taught you how to drive stick in my old '88 truck. I pulled you out of a ditch your first winter driving, no questions asked." Mark had the decency to look ashamed, but only for a second. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at his own expensive Italian shoes, scuffing the dirt. "Mr. Smith," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. It's for the best. This place could be making so much more money. Amelia, she knows what she's doing. You're just messing things up, holding Tyler back." "Messing things up?" I roared the words. The sound came from deep in my gut, an animal sound of pure, unfiltered rage. It startled a bird from the rafters of the barn. The wrench in my hand felt suddenly heavy, like it was an extension of my arm. Messing things up? All the control I'd been holding on to, all the pain from the wedding, all the cold bitterness from that phone call, it just shattered into a million pieces. "You dare to stand on my land, the land I broke my back on for 40 years, the land my wife is buried on, and you tell me I'm messing things up?" The wrench was up now, not pointed at them, but pointing at the fields, at the barn, at the house. "You come to my home, and demand I hand over my entire life's work to To you? I jabbed the wrench toward Amelia. Who in the hell do you think you are? Amelia took off her sunglasses, and the full, unadulterated poison of her was finally visible. Her eyes were cold, dead, and full of a breathtaking, chilling malice. Oh, stop the drama, John. She used my first name, spitting it out like it tasted bad. We all know you've been slipping ever since Mary died. Everyone in town says it. She was lying, but she said it with such confidence. Poor old John, he just hasn't been right in the head. Poor old John, he just sits in that workshop talking to himself. They're right. She took a step closer, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial hiss. You're just a bitter, lonely old man. You can't stand to see your son be more successful than you. You can't stand that he loves me, that he's building his own life. You want to keep him weak. Keep him right here, stuck in your shadow, just like you always have. Shut up! I screamed it. The force of it surprised me. It echoed off the barn wall, loud and raw. Just shut up! I heard you. I heard you at the wedding. Both of them froze. Actually froze, just for a fraction of a second. The arrogance on their faces flickered, replaced by a flash of genuine animal panic. Their well-rehearsed plan hadn't accounted for this. I was looking for the restroom, I said, my voice shaking with rage but gaining strength with every word. I was right outside your door. I heard everything. I pointed the wrench straight at Amelia now, holding it like a weapon. I heard you call him weakling. I heard you laugh about how he'd sign anything you put in front of him. I heard you tell Mark that Chestnut Grove was all yours. You think I'm an idiot? You think I'm not sharp? Amelia's face. It changed. It was like watching a horror movie, the mask of polite society, the fake sweetness, the concerned daughter-in-law. It didn't just drop. It melted away. What was left was raw, uncut, ugly greed, contorted by pure, seething hatred. So what? She shrieked, her voice cracking, climbing an octave. So, what if you heard? What are you going to do about it, old man, huh? Run and tattle to your weakling son? He won't believe you. He chose me. She was admitting it. She was proud of it. She took another step, jabbing her finger at me, closing the distance. You think that talentless, spineless son of yours deserves me? He is lucky to have me. He is a weakling. He's an overgrown, insecure child who's been hiding behind you and his dead mother his whole life. And without me to make his decisions, he would be nothing. He knows it. That's why he loves me, because I'm strong and he's not. I was too stunned to speak. She was owning it all. And this farm? She laughed, a sound with no humor in it, just sharp, cold triumph. This farm is going to be ours anyway. It doesn't matter if you sign or not. Your evidence means nothing. It's your word against mine and Mark's. She gestured to Mark, who was standing there like a stone, pale and terrified. We will prove you are mentally incompetent. We will take it. We'll get doctors to sign off. We'll have Mark testify about your erratic behavior. We'll tell the court how confused you are, how you threatened us with that wrench. Look at you, she screamed, pointing at the tool in my hand. You're just a crazy, violent old man. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, his loving new wife, or the crazy, jealous father who's losing his mind? That was it. There was nothing left to say. The boiling rage in my blood, the heat that had made me scream, it all vanished. It was replaced by a sudden, total, terrifying cold. My head became perfectly clear. The air was sharp. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was perfectly still. I lowered the wrench, but I didn't drop it. I held it at my side. I looked past her, at Mark, who flinched. Then I looked at her, right into her dead, hateful eyes. Get out, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was low, and it was heavy. It had the weight of 40 years of work, of love, of loss, and of absolute final finality. Get off my land. Now. For a second, she looked like she was going to lunge at me, but Mark, finally showing a single spark of self-preservation, grabbed her arm. "Amelia, let's go. He's not kidding. Let's go now." He saw something in my eyes that she was too arrogant to see. He saw that I was done talking. He physically pulled her toward the car. She tried to shake him off, her face purple with rage, but he was stronger, his fear greater than her anger. He bundled her into the passenger seat. She looked back at me, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes promising murder. "You will regret this, you old bastard!" she screamed, her voice muffled by the window. "I will leave you with nothing. Not a penny. Tyler will never forgive you for this. He will hate you. This is war." They got in. The car spat gravel as it reversed, the tires spinning, and it almost hit my truck. It fishtailed as it tore down the driveway, the engine screaming like a banshee. A cloud of dust and exhaust hung in the air, slowly settling in the silence. I stood there, just stood there, I don't know for how long, and then my hands started to shake. A deep, uncontrollable tremor. The adrenaline was dumping out of me, leaving me weak. My legs felt like they might give out. That heavy wrench fell from my numb fingers and clanged on the concrete step, the sound echoing in the sudden quiet. I leaned against the doorframe of my workshop, just trying to catch my breath. I was exhausted. Exhausted down to my bones, down to my soul, like I'd just survived a tornado. My home, my sanctuary, had been violated, invaded. But as I stood there, shaking, I felt something else too. A cold, hard resilience, a clarity. There was no more doubt, no more second-guessing, no more trying to warn Tyler. She was right. This was war, and they had just fired the first and last shot. Monday morning. I was up at 4 a.m., long before the sun. The shaking was gone. The exhaustion was gone. All that was left was a cold, sharp, singular focus. I made a pot of coffee, drank it black, and stared out the kitchen window into the dark, my mind working like a machine. At 6:01 a.m., I called Victor. He picked up on the second ring, his voice gravelly with sleep. "Victor," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I need to hire you. This isn't a friend calling, this is a client. I have a serious, serious problem." An hour later, I was in his office, the first one there. The lights were just flickering on, and the cleaning crew was still emptying the trash. I sat across from his big oak desk, and I laid it all out. Everything. The whispers at the wedding, the chilling phone call with Tyler, the consolidation talk. And then I told him, in precise detail, about Saturday, the POA demand, the insults, the things she said about Mary, and the final blatant threat, "We will prove you are mentally incompetent and take it anyway." Victor, who I'd fished with for 30 years, just listened. He didn't interrupt. He made notes on a yellow legal pad, his handwriting sharp and angry. His face got harder and harder as I spoke. When I finished, he put his pen down. "John, they declared war," he said, echoing my own thoughts. "And that threat? Prove you're incompetent? That's not just angry trash talk. That is a specific legal strategy. They are planning to file for a conservatorship or guardianship. They will try to paint you as senile, confused, and a danger to yourself, to strip you of your rights and your assets." He leaned forward, his friendly fishing buddy demeanor gone, replaced by the lawyer I was paying for. "We can fight this, but we can't just be defensive. We have to attack their credibility before they can even file. We need to go on offense." He picked up his phone. "I'm bringing in Isaac. He's the best private investigator in the state. Ex-cop, digital forensics guy, and as discreet as a ghost. We need to know everything about her, her past, her finances, her associates, where she gets her money. We need to find out who she really is." "Do it," I said, without hesitation. "Whatever it costs. I'm a practical man, Victor. I'm not fighting for feelings anymore. I'm fighting for my land, and I need data. I need evidence." I left Victor's office feeling better. The rage was still there, but it wasn't a wildfire anymore. It was a forge. It was focused. It had a purpose. I knew what I had to do next. I drove straight to Home Depot. This time, I wasn't wandering. I wasn't browsing. I was what they call a solution hunter. I walked past the garden center, past the lumber, straight to the hardware and security aisle. I knew exactly what I needed. I didn't get the cheap stuff. I bought a set of high-security, pick-resistant Medeco deadbolts for every single door on my property, the house, the shop, the barn. Then I went to the electronics section and bought an 8-channel 4K night vision camera system with a 2 terabyte hard drive, one with remote viewing. I spent the next 2 days working. It was the best therapy I could have asked for. I pulled out my craftsman tools. I systematically removed every old lock from my house. I installed the new deadbolts. The solid, heavy thunk of that new hardware sliding into place was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. Each click was a layer of defense, a piece of my control returning. Then, I got on the ladder. I ran wires through the hot attic, under the eaves. I mounted cameras, one on the front porch, aimed at the walkway, one on the back, one covering the workshop, my sanctuary, and one zoomed in, pointed straight down that long driveway. I set up the monitor in my home office. For the first time since the wedding, I felt a measure of control return. I could see my perimeter. There would be no more surprise invasions. My fortress was physical, but it needed to be financial too. That was the next part of the plan. I went to my local bank, the one I'd been with for 20 years. I sat down with Diane, the branch manager who had known me since Tyler was in high school. "Diane," I said, "I need to open a brand new set of accounts. Checking, savings, and I need them completely unlinked from anything else I own. A new foundation." I didn't have to tell her why. She saw the look on my face, the look of a man who was done being a victim. We transferred every penny of my liquid savings, my personal money, into the new, secure account. Then, we put a freeze on all transactions from the farm accounts, requiring my in-person signature for any transfer over $500. While I was doing that, Victor was earning his fee. He fired off certified legal notices to all 3 credit bureaus and every major financial institution in the state, alerting them to a high risk of fraudulent activity and elder financial exploitation connected to my name, specifically referencing any attempt to activate a power of attorney without his and my express, in-person consent. There was one last step. It was the hardest one. I took out my wallet and pulled out the supplementary credit card I'd given Tyler years ago. It was on my account. "For emergencies," I'd told him. "Gas, food, if you're ever in a jam." I looked at it for a long time. This felt different. This felt final. I placed it on Diane's desk. "I need you to cancel this card," I said, my voice quiet. "Immediately, and block any requests for a new one." She nodded, a sad look in her eyes, cut it in half with a pair of scissors, and I felt a sharp, painful pang. It was like cutting an umbilical cord. It was done. That night, I sat in my home office. I looked at the camera monitor, its 4 screens glowing quietly in the dark, showing me my property, safe and silent. I took out my phone. I opened my contacts, found her name, Amelia, and pressed block contact. Then I found Mark's name and did the same. I sent Victor a short text. "All locked down. From now on, all communication goes through you." I had built my fortress. Chestnut Grove was secure. My money was secure. My home was secure. I felt a small, hard-won sense of safety. I had done everything in my power. You know, that feeling, working with my hands, installing those cameras, fixing those locks. It reminded me of who I am. Men like us, especially at our age, we need to feel competent. We need to know we can still solve our own problems, whether it's changing the oil on our own truck, fixing a leaky pipe, or, in my case, fortifying a home against a predator. That feeling of self-reliance, it's everything. It's what keeps us grounded. I'm sure there are a lot of you listening who feel the same way. Do you believe in the power of do-it-yourself? If you do, just type DIY in the comments. It's a good feeling to know you're not the only one who believes in getting your hands dirty. It was a few days after I'd turned my home into a fortress. The anger from the confrontation had cooled, leaving behind that sharp, cold focus. But it was also mixed with anxiety. I'd built the walls, but I was just waiting for the next attack. Every time the phone rang, my stomach would clench. So when I saw Victor's name flash on the screen, I had to take a breath before answering. His voice, thank God, was calm. It was the steady, competent voice of my lawyer, not my fishing buddy. "John, just wanted to give you an update," he said. "Your instincts were dead on. A credit alert just came through. She already tried it." I gripped the phone. "Tried what?" "A mortgage," Victor said, his voice grim. "She used a forged power of attorney, naming herself as the agent for Chestnut Grove, and tried to pull $500,000 out against the farm. It was filed last week, right after that phone call with Tyler." My legs felt weak. $500,000, just like that. "My God," I whispered. "But it didn't go through?" "Not a chance," Victor said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "The legal warnings we sent out put an immediate freeze on everything. The bank's fraud department flagged it instantly. They called me, I told them it was fraudulent, and they killed it. The walls held, John. She's blocked." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since the wedding. A real, deep, shuddering breath. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I wasn't just patching holes. We were ahead of them. She had made her move, and she had failed. "Thank you, Victor," I said, and the gratitude was so thick it almost choked me. "Thank you." A few days after that, Isaac, the investigator, said he had stopped by. He didn't call ahead. He just appeared, his quiet sedan rolling up the driveway right in view of my new camera. He was a man of few words, ex-cop, with eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice. He was my kind of people. I let him in, and he walked right over to the monitor in my office. He watched the screens for a minute, seeing the angles I'd set up. The one on the driveway, the one on my workshop. He just nodded slowly. "Not bad," he grunted. "Good field of vision. You covered your blind spots." Coming from him, that felt like high praise. It was a validation of my work, of my ability to still take care of my own. He didn't make any wild promises. He just sat at my kitchen table, pulling out a small, worn notebook. "She's not clean, John," he said quietly. "She's smart. She covers her tracks, but she's not clean. She's been meeting with some shady people, not just the boyfriend." I must have looked surprised because he just raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah, there's a boyfriend. I'm working on him now. Just let me do my work. I'll find it." His professionalism, his quiet, methodical confidence was like a balm. It was another layer of armor. I wasn't just a scared old man anymore. I had a team. I had hired the right people. That small bit of strength gave me the courage to do something I hadn't done in weeks. I drove into town. I went to the VFW post for the morning coffee. I knew the rumors Amelia and Mark were spreading would be there. I could feel it as soon as I walked in. The chatter died down for a second. I saw a few guys look away, a few others whisper behind their hands. They were wondering if poor old John had finally lost it, just like she'd planned. I felt that sting of isolation, of being shamed in my own community. I just poured my coffee and sat down in my usual corner. Then, Bill Johnson, who I'd known for 40 years, walked over. He put his hand on my shoulder. "John," he said, just loud enough for me to hear. Then Jim, who was in the service with me, came by. He just nodded, his eyes firm. "John." They didn't ask questions. They didn't mention Tyler or Amelia. They didn't need to. That handshake, that firm clasp on the shoulder, that look, it said everything. It said, "We don't listen to gossip." It said, "We know who you are." It said, "We've got your back." That silent, unspoken support from men I respected. It meant more than all the words in the world. I drank my coffee, and for the first time since that day at the church, I didn't feel alone. I had my team, and I had my friends. Another 2 weeks went by, the longest 2 weeks of my life. I tried to keep busy. I went back to my workshop, trying to focus on my woodworking project. The steady sound of the wood planer, the smell of the cedar chips, it was the only thing keeping me sane. I was just measuring a cut when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Isaac. My heart hammered against my ribs. He wasn't a man who called for small talk. I wiped the sawdust off my hands and answered. "John," he said. His voice was flat, no emotion. "I have something. You need to see it. Meet me at Victor's office, 1 hour." I didn't ask questions. I just said, "I'm on my way." I turned off the lights in the shop, the sound of the single buzz of the planer dying in the new silence. The drive into town was a blur. My mind was racing. I have something. It wasn't "I have good news." It wasn't "I have bad news." It was just something. And in my experience, something is almost always bad. I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. The relative quiet of the last 2 weeks, the small victories, it had just been the calm before the real storm hit. I got to Victor's office. His secretary, who usually smiled, just nodded at me with sad eyes and pointed toward the conference room. The door was already closed. I pushed it open. Victor was at the head of the table, his face grim. Isaac was standing by the window, looking out. He turned when I came in. On the polished table between them was a single, thick, brown manila envelope. "Sit down, John," Victor said, his voice gentle. I sat. Isaac walked over and sat opposite me. He didn't say anything. He just pushed the envelope to the center of the table. "She's been busy," Isaac said, "and she's been sloppy." He pulled the metal clasp and upended the envelope. A stack of 8 by 10 glossy photographs slid out. The first one was just Amelia, walking into a high-end restaurant I'd never seen before. The second one, she was walking out, laughing, holding hands with a man who was definitely not my son. The third photo was taken from a car. They were in a parking garage, kissing, and it wasn't a friendly peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Who is that?" I whispered. "His name is Louis Fox," Isaac said, his voice still flat. "Petty fraudster. Couple of minor convictions for check kiting and insurance scams. He's not just a boyfriend, John. He's a partner. We believe he's the co-conspirator in this." I felt a wave of physical disgust. The white wedding dress, the tears, the vows, Tyler's shining, happy face. It was all a lie, a performance, a circus. She wasn't just betraying my son financially. She was betraying him in every way a person can. "But that's not all," Isaac said. He reached back into the envelope and pulled out a different stack of papers. These were documents, police reports, court filings, a copy of a driver's license from another state. Her name isn't Amelia King. That's a legal name change from 3 years ago. Her birth name was something else entirely. He laid out the papers. He told me the story. About her real family in another state. About an older brother. About her parents, who had a modest retirement fund. He told me how she had convinced them to give her power of attorney to manage their savings. How she had systematically drained their accounts over 6 months. How she put the money into an offshore account in this Louis Fox's name. How she left her own parents bankrupt. Her father, Isaac said, tapping a medical report, had a massive stroke a week after he found out. He's in a state-run nursing home. The mother is living with the brother, who works 2 jobs to pay for it all. I just stared at the papers. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a greedy young woman making a bad choice. This wasn't a gold digger. This was a monster. This was a professional predator. The brother, Isaac continued, he's been looking for her ever since. He filed police reports, but she vanished after the name change. He wants justice. He's desperate to testify against her. Victor, who had been silent, finally spoke. His eyes were blazing. "John," he said, tapping in the pile of police reports. "This is it. This is our smoking gun. This isn't a family dispute anymore. This is a pattern of fraud, a clear documented criminal pattern of elder exploitation and financial abuse. Her attacking you wasn't a new idea. It was her playbook." I looked at the picture of her kissing that man. I looked at the report of her father's stroke, and any last, lingering, microscopic hope I had that this could be fixed, that Tyler could be saved. It just evaporated. It turned to dust. The clarity was absolute. My son didn't just make a mistake. He didn't just marry the wrong person. He married a cold-blooded, professional criminal, and she was already planning her next victim. I couldn't sleep that night. I just couldn't. The images Isaac had shown me, they were burned into my mind. The picture of her kissing that man, Louis Fox, the police reports, the story of her parents, her father's stroke, the money she stole. It was too heavy. The exhaustion I'd felt after the confrontation with Amelia was nothing compared to this. This was a sickness in my soul. I felt contaminated. I felt stupid. And I felt more than anything a crushing, overwhelming sadness for my son. This wasn't a mistake he could just learn from. This was a rattlesnake in his bed. After midnight, I gave up on sleep. The house felt like a cage. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my jacket, and walked out of the house. I got in my old truck, the F-50 that still had the faint smell of Mary's perfume in the upholstery, even after all these years. I didn't turn on the headlights. I just drove, the moonlight guiding me through the fields, the tires crunching softly on the dirt path. I drove until I got to the back pasture. I parked under the high branches of the old oak tree. This was our place. This was where Mary and I had stood 35 years ago with a set of blueprints, planning out the farmhouse. She'd pointed to that exact spot and said, "That's where the kitchen window will go. I want to be able to see this tree while I do the dishes." This was where we'd come to watch the sunset, splitting a beer for 30 years. It was the highest point on the property, and you could see all of Chestnut Grove from here. The house, the barn, the fields, our life's work. I got out and sat down, my back against the rough, familiar bark. The air was cool and clean. I looked at the farmhouse in the distance, just a few lights glowing in the dark, and I could feel her presence. It was as real as the tree at my back. I could feel her, just sitting there next to me, just out of sight, and I started to talk to her, not out loud, but inside, a conversation I'd been having for the 5 years since she'd been gone. "Mary," I whispered, just to the wind, "I really messed this one up, didn't I? I dropped the ball, sweetheart." The confession felt like it was being pulled out of me, a heavy stone from my gut. I was so focused on the farm, on building this thing, this legacy. I was so busy trying to give Tyler what I thought he needed, a foundation, a business, that I never stopped to see what he actually wanted. I was always the boss, the man with the answers, the man who fixed things. That was the truth, the one I hadn't wanted to look at. My son's insecurity, the weakness that Amelia had exploited, I had helped create it. I remembered when he was a kid, he loved to paint. He was good at it. I'd glance at his paintings and say, "That's nice, son. Now, come help me fix the fence." I pushed him toward business, toward agriculture, toward my world. I'd been so hard on him, so demanding. I wanted him to be tough, like me. And in trying to make him tough, I'd made him brittle. I'd made him easy prey for the first person who came along and whispered how strong and smart he was. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, all my work, all my sweat, and I had failed in the one place that mattered most. I had failed my son. I had failed her. I sat there for a long time, just drowning in that sadness. The anger was gone, the focus was gone, all that was left was the ache. And then, a strange quiet peace settled over me, like a warm blanket. It was her. It was her memory. I could almost hear her voice, as clear as day, not scolding me, just being Mary. I remembered what she always used to say, back when the farm was struggling, back when we were young and fighting for every penny. A neighbor had tried to cheat us on a land deal. I was all fire and brimstone, ready to drive over there and have it out. But Mary, she'd put her hand on my arm. Just a simple, calm touch. And she'd said, "John, family is everything. You know that. But protecting your family doesn't mean you protect them from their mistakes. It means you stand up for the truth, no matter how much it hurts. You stand up for what's right, even if your hands shake." Her words, her strength. She was always the real steel in our family. I was just the loud one. She was the strong one. And I knew, sitting there under that tree, what she would tell me to do. She would tell me to stop mourning what I'd done wrong and to start fighting for what was right. This wasn't just a battle for land or money anymore. It was a battle for the very meaning of our lives. It was a fight for our legacy, for the honor of our name, for Mary. I would not let this monster burn down the house that Mary and I had built. I would not let her destroy our son and spit on our name. The sadness didn't go away, but it moved. It settled deep inside me, not as a weight, but as fuel. I put my hand on the trunk of the tree. "I'll fix this, Mary," I promised. "I'll stand up for the truth, no matter what." I sat there until the first light of dawn started to break over the fields, and then I drove home, my heart heavy, but my spine made of steel. That peace, that hard-won resolve, it lasted exactly 3 days. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen, washing my coffee mug, feeling centered, ready. I was waiting for Victor's next move. I heard a car on the gravel. I looked out the window, expecting Victor or maybe Isaac. But it wasn't. It wasn't a sports car, and it wasn't a truck. It was a dull, gray government sedan. A Ford Taurus, the kind of car that just screams bad news. A woman got out. She was wearing a pantsuit and carrying a heavy-looking clipboard. She looked official. My heart sank. She came to the door and knocked. I opened it, wiping my hands on a towel. "Mr. John Smith?" she asked. Her voice was flat, bureaucratic, no emotion in it at all. "I'm John Smith." She held up a badge. "Sir, I'm Ms. Harris from Adult Protective Services." My blood turned to ice. APS. "We received an anonymous report," she continued, looking at her clipboard, "expressing serious concern for your welfare. The report alleges that you are in potential danger, that you are exhibiting signs of advanced cognitive decline, and may be suffering from self-neglect. It also alleges you are no longer capable of making sound financial or personal decisions." I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. Self-neglect? The words were so absurd, so clinical. I looked down at my clothes, a clean pair of jeans and a flannel shirt. I looked around my kitchen, which was spotless. Cognitive decline? This was it. This was her move. The threat she screamed in my driveway, "We will prove you are incompetent," was no longer a threat. It was happening. Who? Who made this report?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "I'm sorry, sir. All reports are confidential," she said, her eyes scanning the room behind me. "I need to come in. I need to conduct a welfare check and an initial assessment." You can't be serious," I stammered. "This is a lie. This is a setup." Her face didn't change. "Sir, If you refuse my entry, I will be legally obligated to return with a police escort. I'm just here to talk." I felt trapped, violated. I stepped back, my hand shaking. "Fine, come in." As she stepped past me, I pulled out my phone. I hit Victor's number. "You need to get on speaker," I told Ms. Harris. I explained the situation to Victor in short, clipped sentences. His voice came through the speaker, sharp and angry. "Ms. Harris," he said, "this is John Smith's legal counsel. My client will cooperate fully with your visual inspection. He will answer your questions. He will not, however, sign anything without my review. Am I understood?" "Understood, counselor," she said, unfazed. And then it began. The most humiliating, degrading 90 minutes of my life. She walked through my home. My home. She looked in my refrigerator. She opened my pantry. She made notes on her clipboard, and she asked me questions. Questions that were designed to make me feel like a child, like a fool. "Mr. Smith, what did you have for breakfast today?" "Oatmeal, toast, and coffee." "Do you remember today's date, the month and year?" "It's Tuesday, October 10th, 25. "Who is the current president?" I answered, through clenched teeth. She went into my bathroom. She looked at my medication bottles on the counter. "I see you take lisinopril," she said. "What is this for?" "It's for my blood pressure," I said, my face burning, like half the men my age in this country. "Do you ever forget to take it? Do you have someone who helps you manage your medications?" "I manage them myself. I've never missed a dose." "The report states you often seem confused and disoriented." "The report is a lie," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I was desperately trying to control. "It's a malicious lie from a family member who is trying to steal my property." She just wrote that down. Client exhibits signs of paranoia, delusions regarding family members. "I'm not paranoid," I shouted, and then immediately regretted it. That's exactly what a crazy person would yell. She didn't flinch. "Mr. Smith, do you have trouble with basic hygiene? Do you need assistance with bathing or dressing yourself?" That was it. That was the moment. To be asked, in my own home, by a stranger from the government, if I could bathe myself. The humiliation was so profound, so deep, I thought I was going to be sick. This was Amelia's design, to break me, to strip me of my dignity, piece by piece, until I had nothing left. The inspection ended. She left, saying her report would be filed with the county. The second her car was out of sight, my phone rang. It was Victor. He wasn't calm anymore. He was furious. "John, I just got off the phone with the county clerk. They filed. They actually did it." "Filed what? The report?" "No, John. They filed the petition. They are formally petitioning the court for an emergency conservatorship. They are trying to declare you mentally incompetent." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. It was one thing to be threatened. It was another to have a humiliating interview. But this was real. They were in a court. "They're using the report from APS as preliminary evidence," Victor said, his voice clipped. "They're claiming you're a danger to yourself and that the farm's assets are at risk due to your confusion and paranoia. They're trying to strip you of your rights, John. All of them. The right to make your own medical decisions, the right to control your own money. They want to take Chestnut Grove, and they're using the legal system to do it." The rage was so cold and so pure it almost took my breath away. I'm a man in my late 60s. I've worked hard my whole life. I pay my taxes. I've built a legacy. Sure, I've got some arthritis in my hands, especially on cold mornings. My back isn't what it used to be. I have to take that damn lisinopril every morning to keep my blood pressure in check. But my mind is as sharp as the chisels I use in my workshop. And they were trying to take that away from me. They were trying to call me an invalid, a child. "It gets worse," Victor said, and I didn't think it could. "They have a declaration from a doctor." "A doctor?" I haven't seen a doctor in months, other than my regular physical. A Dr. Alistair Finch, Victor said. He signed a sworn statement saying that, based on his review of reports from the family, that's Amelia and Mark, he believes you are showing clear signs of cognitive decay and persecution complexes, and that an immediate psychiatric evaluation is warranted. That's when I felt it. True, cold helplessness. How do you fight that? How do you fight a lie when it's wearing a white coat and signing its name with MD? They had bought a doctor. They had weaponized the system. They try to do that, don't they? They try to weaponize your age against you. It's one of the biggest fears we have as we get older. It's not just the fear of getting sick. It's the fear of being dismissed. The fear of being told you're senile, out of touch, confused, or not sharp anymore. I've always prided myself on my mind. I can still calculate board feet in my head faster than a kid with a smartphone. I manage the accounts for this whole farm. I worry about my cardiovascular health, my joints, but they attacked my mind. It's a dirty, evil fight. I'm just curious, has anyone listening ever felt that? Ever had someone dismiss you, talk down to you, or assume you didn't know anything just because of the gray in your hair? If you have, and you know you're as sharp as you've ever been, do me a favor. Just type "still sharp" in the comments below. It helps to know you're not the only one. I stood there in my kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I felt that helplessness. But then I felt the memory of Mary. I felt that promise I'd made under the oak tree. Stand up for the truth. No, I said into the phone. No? What do you mean, John? I mean, no, I said, my voice changing. The helplessness was burning off, replaced by that cold, hard resolve. We are not going to their doctor. We are not playing their game. You tell the judge we welcome an evaluation, but not from their hired gun. We demand a full, independent psychiatric evaluation from a neutral third-party expert panel appointed by the court itself. There was a silence on Victor's end. Then he let out a low whistle. John, that's a hell of a poker move. It's risky, but it's brilliant. It shows we have nothing to hide. It calls their bluff. It's not a bluff, I said, looking out the window at the land Mary and I had loved. They want to say I'm crazy? Fine. Let them try. I'll fight them. I'll fight them in a doctor's office, and I'll fight them in a courtroom. I was done being a victim. I was done being violated. This was my line in the sand. My gamble paid off. The judge, annoyed by their stunt, granted our motion for an independent panel. The evaluation was clinical, cold. I sat in a sterile room with 3 doctors who didn't know me, and they asked me questions for 4 hours. They asked about the farm, about my finances, about my family. They asked me to draw a clock, to remember a list of words, to explain a proverb. It was humiliating, but I was calm. I was centered. I had the truth, and I had Mary's memory. I answered every question with precision. I explained the timeline of Amelia's fraud. I wasn't a paranoid old man. I was a victim. A week later, Victor called. I passed. The report was glowing. 0 signs of cognitive decline, Victor read. Mr. Smith presents as highly intelligent, lucid, and possessing a sharp memory. He is perfectly competent to manage his own affairs. The relief was enormous, but it was short-lived. Amelia's lawyer, as expected, immediately filed a motion to dispute the findings, claiming the panel was rushed and failed to appreciate the nuances of familial reports. The judge, now clearly irritated with them, denied their motion and set a final, binding hearing date. The official summons was delivered to my door. Seeing it in black and white, Amelia Smith and Tyler Smith versus John Smith, my own son's name on a lawsuit against me, that was a different kind of pain. The final battle was set. The tension in the air at the farm was so thick I could barely breathe. The days leading up to the hearing were the longest of my life. I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep. I just waited. Then, the day before the hearing, Victor called. "John," he said, and I could hear a strange tightness in his voice. "They're blinking. Their lawyer just called me. They've made a settlement offer." I was stunned. An offer? After all this? "They're scared, John," Victor said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction. "They know we have Isaac's evidence. They know their case is built on lies, and they're terrified of what will happen when that brother of hers takes the stand. They want to avoid a public hearing at all costs." "What's the offer?" I asked, my hand gripping the phone. Victor took a deep breath. "It's an insult, but I'm legally obligated to tell you. They will agree to, and get this, graciously withdraw their petition for conservatorship." He said the words like they tasted bad. "They will agree to stop calling you incompetent. In exchange, you will agree to sign over management of the Chestnut Grove Holding Company to a family trust, which they would control," I finished, my voice flat. "Exactly. And you would be given a generous monthly stipend to live on. You'd keep the house, but you'd have no control over the land, the business, or the finances." I was quiet. I looked out the kitchen window, at the barn I had built with my own hands, at the fields Mary had loved. A stipend, a monthly allowance, like a child. They still thought I was weak. They still thought that after everything, the APS visit, the evaluation, the threats, that I would be so terrified of a public fight, so scared of my own son, that I would take their scraps. They thought they could buy my dignity. They thought they could buy my silence. They thought they could buy Mary's legacy. "Victor," I said, and my voice was perfectly calm, perfectly clear. All the anxiety, all the fear, it was gone, replaced by that cold, hard steel from under the oak tree. "I want you to call that lawyer back, and you tell him I wouldn't give them a single splinter from my workshop floor. You tell him I wouldn't give them a single blade of dead grass from my pasture. You tell him no deal, no compromise. I will see them in court. I want this in front of a judge. I want the truth on the record. I want everything exposed." There was a long pause on the phone. Then Victor just said, "Attaboy, John. I'll see you tomorrow." That night, we had our war room meeting in Victor's office. It was me, Victor, and Isaac. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and photocopier toner. The conference table was covered in files, binders. Isaac had his timeline laid out, a terrifyingly methodical map of Amelia's entire life of fraud. The photos of her and Louis Fox, the bank statements from her offshore accounts, the police reports from her brother. Victor had his legal strategy, yellow pads filled with cross-examination questions. We went over my testimony, what to say, what not to say, how to answer their lawyers' tricks, and then we talked about our smoking gun. "Her brother is safe," Isaac said, his voice low. "He flew in this afternoon. He's at a secure hotel under a different name. He's nervous, but he's ready. He wants to do this." Victor looked at me. "John, this is it. Tomorrow, we pull the pin." I drove home. The house was quiet. I walked into my closet and pulled out my best suit. It was a dark, conservative charcoal gray, the suit I had worn to Mary's funeral. It was the only one that felt right. This was an ending too. It was an end to the lies. I laid it out, ironed a white shirt, and picked a simple dark tie. I felt ready. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't a confused old man. I was a man who had done the work. I had the facts, I had the law, and I had the truth. Tomorrow, this would be over. The courtroom was old. The air was heavy, smelling of old wood, floor wax, and the faint, metallic tang of anxiety. It was dead silent, except for the shuffling of papers and the click-clack of the court reporter's keyboard. I sat next to Victor at our table. I saw them. They were on the other side. Amelia, Tyler and their lawyer. Tyler looked terrible. He was thin, pale, with dark, hollow circles under his eyes. He looked haunted. He stared straight ahead at the judge's empty bench, and he would not look at me. Not once. Amelia sat next to him, straight-backed, wearing an expensive-looking navy blue suit. She looked at me and she smiled, a small, confident, mocking smile. She whispered something to her lawyer, who laughed. Mark sat in the row right behind them, sweating, constantly adjusting his tie. The judge entered. We all stood. He sat. In the matter of the conservatorship of John Smith, and it began. Their side went first. Their lawyer was slick. He called their bought and paid for expert, Dr. Finch. The doctor confidently took the stand and spouted his nonsense. He spoke of clear indicators of cognitive decay, persecution complexes, age-related paranoia, all based on, as he admitted, extensive reports from the family. He'd never even met me. Then they called Mark. He walked up, swore on the Bible, and then lied. He lied about everything. He told the court that I had been erratic and aggressive for months. He recounted the day they came to the farm, twisting it into a horror story. He claimed I was incoherent, screaming wildly, and that I threatened them with a heavy steel wrench in an unprovoked, violent rampage. I sat there, my hands clenched on my lap, feeling the blood pound in my temples. This was their strategy, to paint me as a violent, crazy old man. Then it was Victor's turn. He stood up, and the friendly fishing buddy was gone. A shark was in his place. He calmly walked to the podium. "Dr. Finch," he began, his voice polite, "thank you for your testimony. Can you please state for the court the date and time of your first examination of my client, Mr. John Smith?" The doctor shifted. "Well, I did not conduct a physical examination. My opinion is based on a review of the extensive records and reports." Victor cut him off. "So, you have never met my client? You have never spoken to him? You have never laid eyes on him until today, in this courtroom?" "Well, no, but..." "So, your entire sworn professional medical opinion," Victor said, his voice rising, "is based entirely on hearsay? Hearsay from the very person, Ms. Amelia Smith, who stands to gain millions of dollars if your testimony is believed. No further questions, Your Honor." The doctor was dismissed, his reputation in shreds. Then Victor called Mark back to the stand for cross-examination. "Mr. N.B.," Victor started, "you testified that my client was violent. But isn't it true that you were trespassing on his property?" Mark stammered. Victor pressed on. "Isn't it true that you and Ms. Smith were there to demand he sign a power of attorney, a document you knew he did not want to sign?" Mark turned red. "And Mr. N.B.," Victor said, pulling a file from Isaac's binders, "you testified that you are a concerned friend of the family. Is that right?" "Yes," Mark said, his voice weak. "A friend or a paid associate?" Victor held up a document, a bank statement. "Can you explain to the court this wire transfer for $50,000 from an offshore account linked to Ms. Smith into your personal checking account? An account," Victor added, "that, according to these casino markers, was overdrawn by $40,000 at the time? Isn't it true, Mr. N.B., that you weren't a friend? You were a co-conspirator with heavy gambling debts?" Mark just deflated. He started sweating, stammering, I don't know. She said it was a loan." He was destroyed. And then Victor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense calls its first witness." The war room was now in session. Victor set up a projector. "We have established the petition is based on lies. Now we will establish the motive." The first image flashed on the courtroom wall, huge, for everyone to see. It was Amelia, kissing Louis Fox outside the restaurant. I heard a sound from the other side of the room, a small, choked gasp. It was Tyler. He was staring at the screen, his face a mask of white, stunned confusion. He looked at Amelia. She was whispering furiously to her lawyer. Victor clicked to the next photo, the one in the parking garage. "This," Victor said, "is Louis Fox, a known associate of Ms. Smith and a man with a history of financial fraud." He then put up the bank statements, the attempt to mortgage Chestnut Grove for $500,000, the warnings that had stopped it. This petition for conservatorship was not filed out of concern. It was filed as an act of retaliation, a desperate attempt to gain control after their initial fraud failed. Tyler was shaking his head, just shaking, looking from the screen to Amelia, his eyes wide with horror. "And now, Your Honor," Victor said, his voice dropping, "the defense calls its final witness. We call Mr. Name of N.E." I watched Amelia. The color, the arrogance, the confidence, it all vanished. Her face went slack, a waxy pale color. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She turned to her lawyer and, in a voice loud enough for the whole courtroom to hear, she shrieked, "You said they'd never find him. You promised." The judge banged his gavel. "Silence." The brother, N.E., walked up. He was a simple man, a mechanic from another state, wearing a suit that didn't fit him right. He looked terrified, but when he sat down and Victor started asking him questions, his voice was steady. He told his story. He told the court his sister's real name. He told them about his parents, about their retirement, about how his sister had come back into their lives, how she'd charmed them, how she'd gotten their power of attorney to help them with their finances. He described in heartbreaking detail how she had drained every penny they had, how his father had a stroke the day the bank foreclosed on their home of 40 years, how his father had died 2 years later in a state-run facility. The story was identical. It was her playbook. And then Tyler stood up. He just stood. He was shaking so hard I thought he would fall. "Is it true?" he yelled, his voice cracking, pointing at knee. "Is what he's saying true?" He turned to Amelia. "Amelia, is that true?" Amelia just stared ahead, her face like stone, her jaw clenched. She didn't say a word. And her silence was the loudest confession in the world. Tyler, he just broke. He collapsed back into his chair, a terrible, sobbing sound tearing out of him. He put his face in his hands. Mark, the best friend, tried to put a hand on his shoulder. Tyler recoiled, shoving his hand away. "Don't," he choked out. Don't you touch me." It was over. The spell was broken. The truth, in all its ugly, brutal, and horrifying light, was finally out. The judge was no longer bored. He was livid. He didn't even recess. He banged his gavel. "In the matter of John Smith," he said, his voice booming with cold fury, "I find this petition to be not only baseless, but malicious, predatory, and a disgusting abuse of the legal protections intended for our most vulnerable citizens." He looked at me. "Mr. Smith, this court finds you to be 100% competent, and it offers its sincere apologies for what you have been put through. Your son," he said, glaring at Tyler, "owes you a profound apology." He then looked at Amelia's lawyer. "I am referring you to the state bar for disciplinary action, and as for Ms. Smith, or whatever her name is, and her associates, Mr. Mark, N.B., and Mr. Louis Fox," he looked at the bailiff, "I am ordering a criminal investigation, effective immediately, on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and financial elder abuse. Take them into custody." And just like that, it was done. I watched them put handcuffs on her. She didn't cry, she just looked at me. One last look of pure, venomous hatred. I just looked back. I felt nothing, just empty. And then, as the bailiff led her away, all the air I had been holding for a year, it just came out of me. My shoulders slumped. I put my head in my hands, and I let it go. All of it. The weight was gone. My chest felt light. It was over. A few months went by. The world kept turning. Amelia was convicted. With her brother's testimony and Isaac's evidence, she didn't stand a chance. She got a heavy sentence. So did Mark and Lewis Fox. Tyler filed for an annulment, which the judge granted immediately on the basis of fraud. He came back to the farm, not to the main house. He's living in the old guest cottage down by the creek. He's in therapy. We're talking, slowly. It was hard. There were a lot of long silences, a lot of meals eaten without a word. But we started. Not about the past, just small things, the weather, the price of feed. Then, one afternoon, I was in my workshop, the familiar smell of grease and cedar filling the air. The door creaked open. It was Tyler. He stood there for a minute, just watching me work. He looked better, still thin, but his eyes were clearer. "Dad," he said, his voice quiet. That old tractor, the John Deere, the ignition is sticking again." I nodded. "It does that." He shuffled his feet. "I was wondering, could you show me how to fix it?" I stopped what I was doing. He was awkward. He was ashamed. But he was here. He was trying. He wanted to learn. I looked at him, not as the weakling Amelia had seen, but as my son, a man who was hurt and was trying to find his way back. I picked up a clean rag, wiped my hands, and grabbed a 1/2-inch wrench from my craftsman set. I held it out to him. "Let's go," I said. We worked together, side by side, in the quiet afternoon, just the sound of metal on metal. I watched my son learn. Chestnut Grove was safe. My family, scarred as it was still my family. And my legacy, my true legacy, was standing right next to me. I felt peace. A deep, quiet peace. That was all I ever wanted.